Alright, welcome back. And if you're new here, I'm Joe, and I was in a pornography addiction for about 17 years of my life before I got the right help to stop. So this includes the typical free advice that we find online, such as NoFap, such as cold showers, such as workout routines, and also, for me personally, 2 paid programs that were unsuccessful in getting the result that I wanted, stopping the behavior. So it's safe to say at this point that I've kind of learned a thing or two about what methods are effective and what methods aren't as effective when it comes to stopping compulsive pornography behavior. So eventually I got third time lucky and I met Tom Molyneux and Mary Paulus, who introduced me to the Beyond Compulsion method, which has a key focus on addicted neural pathways and how discomfort from urges, from strong emotions, can be turned around into the result that we want, stopping the behavior. Do excuse me, I'm pretty close to the mic, I realize, so I'll keep this distance. Hopefully, we'll be all right. So today's going to be a good one, and I'll be reacting to a few clips from a channel who sort of deals with matters in the same realm. This is HealthyGamerGG, also known as Dr. K. And the first thing I want to say is I think this channel's awesome, right? I definitely recommend giving this channel a watch, his channel a watch. So I've benefited off his content on, so many issues, right? When it comes to mental health and getting sort of a top-down view perspective when it comes to, what's going on inside my head. Like I remember a period where it was a few years ago and I was playing a game at the time on my PC, and he does a lot of long form content, and one of these episodes was related to trauma, and I had it on in the background, and it was great information, and I gained a lot of sort of understanding and insight. He's also a licensed medical professional, so it's safe to assume we got a pretty good source of info. So yeah, Dr. K has covered the topic of pornography addiction in particular, and from what I have heard of his content to date, gives a pretty accurate account / perspective of what a porn addict is experiencing, and gives a pretty decent take also on the mechanisms at play, especially for those guys like me who at one point were in that spot of, helplessness and hopelessness, not really understanding what was going on and thinking ultimately that, I wouldn't be able to stop. And so just to clarify, I'm only wanting to just pick out some of the key points here, which are things from a former addict's perspective that really jumps to my mind. So I still think that you should totally watch the original full version of the video, which I'll link in the description below. There are probably going to be a few things that I'm sure I'll differ on, but I guess that's the point of this critique, right? So without further ado, let's get on to the first clip.
Anytime your brain wants something, right, it starts by trying to entice you. So it says like, hey man, like let's get high, like let's have a good time. It's fun, it's the weekend, maybe it's not quite the weekend, it's a Monday and it's been a hard day and oh, the weekend wasn't quite as fun as you thought. It'll come up with whatever it can to try to get you to use.
Yeah, this is a great impersonation of how self-talk sort of pans out when you have developed addicted neural pathways to pornography or any mind mood altering experience for that matter. So what I like to call this is junkie thinking or addict thinking, when the addicted part of the mind, which is essentially the result of years and years of engaging, years of building those addicted neural pathways up, starts to generate dialogue within your mind to engage. The number one thing that the addicted part of the mind wants to get you to do is engage, and it will do anything and come up with any reason it can in its power to get you to engage in the behavior. And so this is a great representation of it putting out excuses out there, and it could be anything, right? Oh, it's so hot right now. It is the weekend. We have no work to do today. Oh, you got up late and it's a bit too late to do any work. Any of these excuses can come up, right? And it's the addicted neural pathways that have developed over time to sort of form this way of thinking that habitually becomes this sort of powerhouse that comes into play. And therefore, when you have these urges, it's quite difficult in that moment to sort of resist or use willpower, not listen to it or not pay attention to it, and to not engage and to not use pornography in that moment, right? And so we've all been there before. I've certainly been there. And so, yeah, it's a great sort of first person view of how an addict's mind sort of develops dialogue and speaks when we're in that situation.
And then if you say no, the addiction is like, now I'm feeling jittery. Come on, bro. Like, let's take the edge off. Just take the edge off a little bit, right? Like, we don't have to party the whole way. Like, let's just take the edge off. Let's just try to do this. It'll help us work. It'll help us go meet our friends. Like, the rest of the day will be good. Like, come on, man. Like, let's take away a little bit of this negativity. Let's move towards positivity. And then if you say no, then the brain starts getting pissed. Like, like now I'm going to give you withdrawal, right? You feel this withdrawal. We've got headaches. We've got stomach aches. We've got whole body pain. We're going to have a little bit of diarrhea. And then if you still white knuckle it, if you resist, then your brain gets angry at you, says, what do you think you're doing? We need this stuff. I told you we need this stuff. Look at how much we're hurting now. Now the headache intensifies. Now you have diarrhea. Now you're vomiting. And then ultimately, if you end up giving in, what your brain kind of says is like, why do you make me do this to you, man? Like, why do you have to make me hurt you so much in order to get what we need, right? It's just like hunger and thirst to your brain, where if you deprive your body, it starts to punish you. It literally sends you negative signals, not positive signals. It punishes you for not giving it what it wants. And so,
yeah, this is really good. So you can see that the addict thinking, the junkie thinking that I was talking about before, adds momentum onto these thoughts because of those addicted neural pathways in place. And what you can tend to sort of notice within these moments after it compounds, the thoughts keep going and going and going when you're in those moments of intense urges and discomfort, is that a lot of convoluted thoughts start to appear, a lot of self-deprecating thoughts start to appear, and all this is very expected when you've been in an addiction, especially to pornography, for a while. And as we all understand, a lot of negative thinking is involved in general when you're in a full-time addiction. I say full-time addiction because when you're in this situation, being in an addiction to pornography, that is, can very commonly be equivalent to a full-time job. Yes, you're engaging in pornography when you're engaging in it, but then you've got the shame, then you've got all the other areas of life that it's affecting. And sort of this cycle of thinking can constantly sort of happen before the urges and even after the urge sort of happens and you've engaged. But yeah, this is great. This is a great sort of dialogue that sort of pans out before an urge happens or when you're trying to use willpower to resist it. It's another sort of reason why willpower is pretty ineffective when it comes to dealing with compulsive behaviors. And it's cool that we get to see Dr. K here, like, give a very accurate representation of all this internal dialogue that's going on. So yeah, props to that.
as we resist cravings, our brain begins to learn what kind of signals do I need to send to this dumbass to get what I want. And so the real paradoxical thing that we see in addiction is that the more patients resist and fail, the more intensive their cravings become. So
yeah, and this is the nature of the cycle. When addictive neural pathways have been developed to such an extent over a certain period of time, it's very hard to stop. And as Dr. K said, in this situation, the more that we try to fight, the more that we try to resist, the more ineffective the strategy becomes, because the addicted neural pathways have also become accustomed to that strategy. And so we're in a point where we're still engaging in the behavior, even though we're trying to stop. And the negative consequences of being in the addiction are still happening, are still around. And our personal circumstances, unfortunately, in many cases, just get worse over time. And it's not that we're at fault for being in this situation. It's more commonly that we just haven't ascertained the right strategy to use in order to stop. But it's a tough situation, being the whole way there.
Our whole strategy in addiction psychiatry tends to be to avoid fighting cravings. Now, there are good reasons to fight cravings, and we'll kind of get to that in a second, but I just want to point out that we sort of see these two very different things. The first is that if we are grappling and white-knuckling our cravings over and over and over again, that doesn't usually lead to success based on our research. A lot of people become sober without ever seeing a psychiatrist, so we're not entirely sure exactly what they do. And on the other hand, we see that all of our interventions are not directly fighting cravings. In fact, they're used to kind of dodge cravings.
So I'm not sure I would completely agree with the take being said by Dr. K in this segment pertaining to the way that he uses the word dodge when he says dodge the craving. After having successfully stopped my compulsive pornography behavior using tools in those moments of urges, in those moments of compulsive desire, in those moments of cravings, I've learned that the way to actually successfully rewire addicted neural pathways, which is the goal here, is to face the compulsive desire in that moment, to lean into the compulsive desire in that moment, to connect with the urge, to connect with the craving in that moment. So the way that Dr. K here uses the word dodge, I wouldn't agree with. I definitely do agree with the way that he says you don't want to fight the craving. I think that's a correct use of language as far as I'm concerned. When he uses the word dodge here, I know that for sure the nature of compulsive desire is that it refuses to be ignored. So if we're dodging it in that moment and we don't use any tools in that moment, we're just going to further it down the line because it will just come back in the future and we're just going to experience the same situation with the same urge, or it even gets more intense in that moment. And as we talked about before, all that addict thinking, all that junkie thinking that can come up in those moments to really entice us to engage. And we don't use any tools in that moment to do rewiring during the urges happening, and we're just pushing the work further down the line. The key here is that rewiring addicted neural pathways is most effectively done in those moments of urges, in those moments of discomfort, in those moments of intense cravings. So when that opportunity arises, because it is an opportunity, you want to use tools to rewire in those moments of intense urges. So definitely, I would change the word dodge here.
So instead of just randomly resisting the craving and then ultimately giving into it, which will intensify the craving the next time you step into the ring, what we really want to do is almost schedule our pornography use. So one of the things that I'll do with my patients is sort of pick 2 times throughout the day where they are allowed to watch pornography. This has a very interesting effect. The first is that outside of those windows, it becomes easier to resist. But even then, they're resisting a little bit. It becomes easier to win the battle of pushing the pornography until 11 a.m. and 6 p.m., let's say.
Nice. So this one's a bit of a tricky one to unpack. On the one hand, getting out of deprivation thinking when it comes to rewiring addicted neural pathways is a pretty essential step. So a lot of us, when trying to stop our behavior with porn, will tell ourselves, I cannot engage in porn. I cannot engage in PMO. I cannot look at pornography, etc., etc. Like I was totally in this line of thinking when I was trying to stop, or starting out when stopping, right? The fact is that this mindset is not rooted in a rational position because we will always have that choice to engage if we choose to. That choice, it won't be taken away from us. Acknowledging that we have this choice is actually the first step to empowerment, the empowerment that we're looking for in this case, at least. The truth of the matter is that we just do not want the consequences of engaging in pornography, all the shame, all the guilt, all the disappointment, all the lack of self-trust, all the lack of self-integrity that we feel after relapsing, that we're all familiar with. We don't want that. So getting clear, getting into that rational position, getting into that rational mindset is an essential first step of starting the rewiring process. So I think Dr. K does a great job here by using this sort of template of scheduling your pornography use. However, a big however, scheduling in this case, when he gives permission for people to engage, in this case his clients. Of course, you don't need permission to engage, but I'm just trying to make the point that when you are scheduling, it's quite the opportunist moment for addicted neural pathways to get those addict thoughts, those junkie thoughts activated, whereby those time frames, I believe it was like 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. But these time frames can, it can be easily be shifted. Like the addicted part of the mind if you're engaging, and once you choose to engage, the addicted part of the mind is back in control indefinitely. These hours can, like, let's say it shifts from 4 p.m. to midnight, or it keeps on shifting and indefinitely shifting once you make the choice to engage, because the addicted part of the mind is now back in control, and all these junky thoughts, all these addictive thoughts come into the forefront again. As we know, once you choose to engage once, the desire to engage again increases. The addictive thoughts come back stronger. So all the negative self-talk, all that, the feelings of shame, the feelings of not being yourself. What I'm saying here is that as long as that you're aware of that choice and the consequences of that choice, then it's all fair game. It all comes back to the forefront. Just know what you are choosing to do and why you're choosing it.
Over time, what do we learn from doing this? Not only does our brain learn to intensify the cravings, but we learn that we are powerless. I fought it, and who wins in the end? The addiction wins. The pornography wins. The alcohol wins. And then tomorrow I wake up, I'm sure I'm going to do it, bro. Let's go. And then who wins in the end? The alcohol wins.
Yeah, it's a tough lesson to learn when you've been engaging for that long and those addicted neural pathways have kicked in so many times, and that you have been unsuccessful to stop so many times. There comes to a point where that belief of not ever being able to stop, being in that state of helplessness and hopelessness, feeling that you're so powerless over this thing, it's actually so common, and it's very expected in this situation when you don't actually have a way to deal with addicted neural pathways to pornography. And experiencing all these, thoughts of negative thoughts, these thoughts of powerlessness is a full-time experience. It really permeates into other areas of your life. And a lot of us have felt this, and it's a tough situation to deal with. The thing is, when you have the right strategy, when you come into the situation from a position of power, from a position of strength, not from a position of, powerlessness and feeling helpless, and being able to connect directly with the compulsive desire in the moments of, urges and discomfort, the game changes completely. And obviously, it took me a very long time to actually understand this and get the right help in order to learn this.
I know this sounds kind of paradoxical because I said don't resist cravings in the first place, but this is a really important principle to understand. See, when it comes to physical substances, the clock is kind of ticking against you, that the intensity of what you feel will get worse and worse and worse. But if you can bypass this critical point in pornography addiction where your brain is trying to tell you like, hey, I need this, if you can really just wait it out, it's not about beating it, it's not about conquering it, it's just about resisting for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, then things will start to work in your favor.
Yeah, another good one here. So when you're feeling those intense moments of discomfort, those intense moments of urges, and Dr. K says, waiting those moments out, 50 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour. The word I would replace that is embrace. Embrace those moments of temporary discomfort. Embrace those moments of urges. The thing is, with the right tools in place, when you're experiencing those urges, when you're experiencing that discomfort, when you're experiencing the cravings, if you have the right tools to use in those moments, if you can connect with the desire in that moment and use the right tools with it, you're going to be able to make so much progress when it comes to rewiring addicted neural pathways. A good saying that I actually learned from Mary Paulus, one of the founders of BCA, Beyond Compulsion Academy. She said something that really stuck with me, and she explained that 90 seconds of using said tool is more effective than 90 days of nofap. And I couldn't agree any more with that statement. The key here is that when you're feeling these periods of discomfort and urges, and as Dr. K says, cravings, these moments of cravings can turn into opportunities, golden opportunities to rewire addicted neural pathways, to reverse all of this effect that has been happening for years. And it doesn't matter where you're at, how long you've been engaging for, what you're watching, the nature of what you're watching. The composition of these neural pathways are temporary. It's just what you have right now. It's not permanent. It can change. It's malleable. And with the right tools, in those moments, rewiring can happen, and you can feel good while the process happens. You don't have to feel that Recovery is something that you have to like drag yourself through, and it's a big chore. It's a process that can actually be enjoyed moment by moment.
This is where things are kind of paradoxical, but usually what I'll do with my patients is I won't work directly to conquer the addiction, and that's the bulk of the work that we'll do. We'll really try to develop a sense of purpose or meaning in life. And we're not quite sure what the neuroscientific mechanism behind this is. My theory is that when you have a purpose in life, when you have a sense of meaning, it makes the negativity worth it, right? So if I want to become a doctor, let's say, and I'm in medical school, studying every day, spending my 20s, like while my friends are like going on vacation and stuff, and I'm racking up debt here in the United States, like all this stuff sucks for me, but I'm able to tolerate the negativity because there is a greater purpose. I'm sacrificing for the sake of something.
So I would disagree with this take in particular. So a lot of people who I've met within these groups and these programs, after being years on, these recovery programs, these recovery groups, a lot of the people in them aren't people who are missing that much meaning in their life, right? A lot of them are religious. A lot of them have families. A lot of them are in solid careers, being doctors, being lawyers, being in the creative arts, and entrepreneurs, respectively. And so I've never been able to quite, see the correlation of meaninglessness in life and pornography addiction from that perspective. So the more objective take that I would propose is that these are just people who have addicted neural pathways to pornography for whatever reason. It started at a certain period or a certain age in their life, and it's just progressed throughout their life, and they're in this situation. And I have heard this take, elsewhere. I just want to give credit to Dr. K here in actually stating that he's not fully certain of how the neuroscience in this realm sort of functions. What can be stated about this situation is when it comes to talking about purpose and how this sort of affects the situation, it can really convolute the thinking here. Because when it comes to addicted neural pathways and we have all these thoughts, getting us into like these negative thought patterns of, what's wrong with me? Where am I going wrong? Where have I gone wrong? What am I doing wrong in life for me to be in this situation? All these thoughts are coming up from these addicted neural pathways. And of course, these pathways are a temporary situation. And the take on using finding your purpose as a way of embracing the discomfort of the whole situation, such as the shame, such as the guilt, such as all the negative emotions that comes from being in this addiction, it does make sense. It does appear to be a sort of legitimate strategy, but success isn't really a realistic prospect here because of how the nature of addicted neural pathways will still invoke compulsive desire, as they always have, and rewiring isn't taking place when you're trying to actively pursue a purpose or a greater sort of meaning in life as a strategy to counter addiction. And in fact, as most of us have probably experienced at this point, being in the addiction makes all these achievements and all these sort of successes feel a lot less joyful when we do achieve them. No matter how great they may seem or feel at the time, there's always that background noise, that background thing that just weighs down on that mood, that just weighs down on that victory and doesn't amplify it in any way, shape, or form. And it really dampens the spirit of victory, so to speak. Bottom line is, working on your purpose doesn't really deal with the addiction itself. It doesn't deal with the mechanism. It doesn't address the addiction directly. And it is so important to really be intentional when it comes to isolating the addiction, when it comes to isolating the addictive mechanism itself. And it's all very achievable if you can approach it from a place of strength and power with the right method.
And thankfully, pornography is one of these things where it's not quite as intense of a slippery slope as some of these substance use disorders. So even in this process, people will oftentimes use while they are building up a life that is worth living. So I know it sounds bizarre, but I strongly encourage y'all to pay attention to your life and look at what happens when you try to resist a craving. Because if you resist and lose, chances are the next battle will be harder to win.
Yeah, so I can't quite speak for the situation regarding other substances, but I can tell you for sure that when it comes to pornography, or when you go on places such as the NoFap forum, where you have these constant threads of junkie thinking, of addictive thinking, written in word form, these threads of helplessness and hopelessness, these posts of powerless language. I can tell you for sure that pornography is a slippery slope when you're in that situation full time, for sure. And what I also want to say, just to address what Dr. K was saying, you can definitely address the addiction when it comes to pornography in the right way, and you do not have to tolerate it in your life. You do not have to take the position of using while you're building your life in the right direction. You can absolutely address pornography. You can absolutely stop the behavior and continue with your life without that compulsion in your life being a problem. It's absolutely possible. And this is coming from someone who used to be in that situation of helplessness and hopelessness, thinking that I would never be able to stop. But you don't have to tolerate this. You don't have to live this situation. You can solve this problem and move on. It just takes the right strategy. It just takes the right tools. So during this review, I'm pretty sure you might have heard me saying a lot of things which seem pretty counterintuitive. Counterintuitive to perhaps all the advice that you've seen before or that you've picked up online of other programs, of other videos. And that makes sense because I was in that position when I actually first learned the actual stuff that worked in order for me to stop, my pornography behavior. And it always seems that there's a lot to take in when we're trying to learn the right route around this stuff. And if you've been in this situation for a long time, just as I was, we're talking nearly 2 decades, then I have a link down below which you can schedule a call with me. Fully confidential and no expectations. Just another conversation to have to see if I can offer another perspective. And believe me, I've been in the same place. Believe me, I've heard so many perspectives, so many stories, so many different sort of scenarios of how people got addicted, how people have been in this situation for so long. So I'm absolutely here to chat and see where you're at with things.